What up gamers, I'm Sir Mav and welcome back to another Anthem update. The patch notes for update 1.0.4, yeah that's a lot of decimals going on there, has dropped for Anthem and I'm here to give you all the details. I'm not covering everything but it still might be a long one, so if you want to read all the notes for yourself, I've attached the link down in the description box below. Some of the notes were stated during the live stream last week, but there are a ton of them within this patch, from buffs to our javelins, fog walls being removed, increase in loot being dropped on bosses, and of course the Elysian Caches and legendary missions. Lots to cover, so let's get started. So first up we have legendary missions. Basically legendary missions allow you to replay the critical path missions again at a much higher difficulty level. So each of these legendary missions, they're basically one per day, but you have an unlimited amount of times that you can play it. These legendary missions also include apex predators within the mission, so you'll likely see at least one of these. That includes the Ursics, Titans, Furies, or the Escari or Luminaries. Now with the new loot changes within this new patch, they actually have a chance to drop even more additional loot, similar to the change that they made to the chest also, which I'll cover later. But yeah, legendary missions might be a good new farming technique in order to get new loot and also those sought out legendary items, as you'll have the apex predators would have a chance to drop out legendary items, and plus all the higher end mobs that you're going to be going against as well. So might be a viable technique. So next up in the patch notes we have Elysian Caches, and Elysian Caches are what they talked about in the live stream last week. Basically you earn Elysian keys in order to open chests up at the end of strongholds, and the way you acquire these keys, you can only earn one per day, but they're done by completing the daily challenges, and today just happened to be do 2 contracts and you would get an Elysian key. Also be keen to note here that you just don't have to do regular contracts in order to unlock this. It could actually be legendary contracts as well. But basically once you get this key, you can go with a team or with randos in a stronghold, and at the end, once you complete the boss, you unlock these Elysian Caches which show up, and they give you ample time to unlock these too. I went through one with the team, 3 of us happen to have keys, we opened it all 3 up, and that also includes all the items that are opened up during that one session everybody can pick up, so each of you can potentially get 4 total of these 162 possible vanity and crafty items that come in 4 different caches that appear at the end of the stronghold. So everyone in the squad will be able to get the rewards from the chest, but of course that's if everyone is willing to use other keys during that time, or if you're running with a group then each person can get 1 item per chest that gets opened up. And on the EA website they actually listed everything that's in these Elysium chests, from there's a ton of decals in here. Fabrics, leather, victory poses, arrival poses, emotes, there's a wrap in there, and decals. There's a ton of stuff in here, but there is no armor sets. Ben Irving clarified this last week that there are no armor sets within these Elysium chests. So hopefully they rework the store in order to give us the armor sets that we want. Because everybody wants to individualize themselves. I'm sure if you see my other video I talked about this, but hopefully they make some changes in there. You can also get crafting material bundles. Like one of the items that I got in my Elysium chest was I think 80 ranger parts, so you get quite a bit of crafting materials that you can use to craft weapons or other gear within your javelins. Next up, the patch notes cover about loot changes. Chests now have a chance to drop additional items and crafting materials in strongholds, free plays, and missions basically everywhere. We talked about the apex creatures, they're going to drop at a higher rate, and then also GM1 difficulty and higher stronghold bosses will now drop more loot with a chance at additional masterwork and legendary items. And there was some issue with the bosses where legendary wasn't as frequent as it's supposed to be, so hopefully you get those legendary drops on a more frequent basis now. There are also some NVIDIA highlights here within the patch notes. Basically, there's added support for NVIDIA highlights to capture screenshots and game clips automatically, whether it's viewing overlooks, defeating certain larger creatures, performing multi-kills. There's a couple other things on the list, but basically it'll automatically film these things for you without you having to actually capture it yourself or hit the recording button on your NVIDIA G Experience capture program or whatever. Next up, there are some other additional PC settings. One huge one was the field of view sliders that we saw within the stream that they showed some examples of what you could do with it, but there's some crazy things that I've seen already from a couple of content creators on what you can do with this field of view. So definitely if you have a PC, test it out, give it some work and see some of the crazy stuff that you can do as far as field of view. But there's ground field of view, zoomed, flight, swim, pilot. It basically gives you all the options you could think of for field of view settings. They also changed the AFK timer. They reduced it from an auto kick to 10 minutes to 5 minutes. There's also NVIDIA DLSS support now in the game. That's this deep learning super sampling, which is now available for any NVIDIA RTX based video cards. And basically what DLSS provides is a better looking overall image without using as much of the graphics card's main processing capabilities as traditional anti-aliasing techniques. In theory, this should free up some more resources for additional rendering tasks, thereby opening up the possibility to greater detail levels of higher frame rates, depending on the preferences of the user, of course. So hopefully this will provide you with less strain on your RTX card if you are using it. I am using a 2070 RTX GeoForce, so I'll definitely be testing this out and see what the quality changes may be with this. For those of you also having some other performance issues, they've also improved performance on gameplay effects that were updating or running often to reduce performance strain on your PC. Example of these effects were, of course, the UI, the weather that's going on within the environment, and of course time of day and level art and animated props. So they've made some improvements in optimization here, so hopefully you see less strain on your CPU here. Another cool feature that you might have noticed during the stream or today if you had popped in today is that now you can access the Forge via the main menu while in Fort Tarsis or the launch bay, and there's no longer a loading screen when entering the Forge. I mean, even when you go out of a mission, if you click the Forge, it will go automatically to the Forge. No hesitation, no nothing. Of course, you will load afterwards whenever you choose where you want to go, whether it's Fort Tarsis or the launching bay, but it's super fast. So definitely props to the dev team on that one for that quality of life improvement. Now, there are a ton of bug fixes, from the missions to strongholds to gear to abilities. I mean, it's insane. So if you want to read all those, you can check out the link and go through them yourselves. But the ones that I kind of wanted to hit on was in the other section. Is basically they fixed a number of issues that could cause the game to crash. First of all, players can now junk items much faster in their vault, so it wasn't that long delay where it was actually more efficient to, at the end of a mission, go ahead and salvage what you didn't need. Daily, weekly, monthly interaction points now directly linked to the player in the Cortex entry. Match consumables now sort by rarity, then alphabetically. So if you go into your consumables now before going to a mission, you'll see that they're all sorted and not scattered about like they were before. The things I really wanted to get in here within this patch notes though were the features. As far as Masterwork changes, your ability changes, I mean, there was a ton of buffs that came in these patch notes. For one, there was a doubled rate, and so basically they doubled the rate of your cooldown for all your Masterwork gear with multiple charges to regain the charges faster. This includes the Ranger's Venom Darts, the Colossus Railgun, the Interceptor's Cluster Mine, and the Storm's Ice Storm and Ball Lightning. All of the cooldowns for these abilities have been decreased dramatically. They also added a new audio effect for when Masterwork and Legendary items drop in game, and it's definitely noticeable. Even the blues and purples that drop during the game, you can definitely hear them pop more. So first up on the buffs, we'll definitely go with Thick Boy over here, Colossus with its components. I mean, the ablative shielding, grand entrance, reinforced hull, shock treatment, stalwart's badge, and synchronized frame. These are all buffs. One example was with the ablative shielding, increased buff to 40% for 10 seconds instead of what it was recently, 20 seconds for 5 seconds. So that's always nice. Another good one is reinforced hull, increased buff to 33%, which was originally 20%, and removed the cooldown. And then they did some reworks too, like for instance, shock treatment. It was originally the property was hitting enemies with ordnance launcher abilities temporarily lowers thruster heat buildup by 30% for 5 seconds. Not truly viable whenever I was looking at it, but now they changed this to taking damage increases all damage by 8% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 10. So definitely a more potent property than what was before. Another good component change was the synchronized frame, where they changed it from what it was originally you had to defeat the enemy, now it's just you have to hit the enemy to proc that property. Another change to some of the Colossus gear, you have the Fist of the Crucible, which is the Flamethrower Masterwork, or Legendary, whichever one you are using. Basically they changed the property from Victor's Advantage, which was you had to defeat an enemy, and then this would increase the flamethrower damage by 30% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 5. But now it's called Striker's Advantage, which is hitting an enemy increases flamethrower damage by 12% for 10 seconds, and this stacks up to 10. So as where it was more viable whenever you were in lower level difficulty levels, now that you're a higher level difficulty, you're not going to be killing enemies all the time. So now hitting, you're definitely going to be potentially stacking more of those stacks on top of this with that Masterwork than you were before. So definitely more viable. So I love this change. Then you have Best Defense got buffed. Black Powder got buffed, Solvent Green got buffed. We had a rework with Titan's Hail, which is the upgraded Burst Mortar. Basically, it was the special shells burst across wide area. Burst Mortar can now trigger explosive combos. Well, now they upgraded it to special shells burst across a wide area, which creates large physical explosions for each enemy hit. So definitely something we'll want to test out to see if we can see the difference on that one. For the Interceptor, man, everything pretty much got a buff on this one, from Survival Algorithm, Talisman of Power. The Conductive Lattice got a rework. It was originally performing a small melee hit streak of 3 detonates an electric explosion. Well, now its melee hits detonated electric explosion can occur for every 2 seconds. So it seems like you're still going to be hitting that more often now. Vengeance and Matrix also was a rework. All damage is increased by 25% for 5 seconds when suit health declines was the original property, and now it's on low armor. Damage taken is reduced by 50% for 10 seconds. So that's definitely going to help out the Interceptor in damage mitigation whenever they start losing their critical health beams. Then Way of Salvage was a buff, Way of Swift buff, Way of Bold, Way of Integration. I never knew there was so many ways in there. Then you move on to the Interceptor's gear, where basically everything was a buff except for Shadow Claw was a rework. So the Ray Strike instantly recharges with a small streak, which was 2 originally. Now the Shadow Claw is launches 2 Wraith projections that seek enemies. Now I think out of the Ranger and the Storm, I think they have the most buffs of all this patch update. Basically through the components, they're all, it looks like when you look at the patch notes, it looks like there's a bunch of reworks, but really it's just a bunch of buffs. So it's just a bunch of increases to the actual percentages that they were originally. So you're gonna be doing a lot more damage, getting a lot more effects from them. Same thing with the Ranger's gear. The big one though is the Recurring Vengeance, which is the Masterwork or Legendary Seeking Missile. Originally it was after defeating an enemy, regain 100% charge, which could occur every 7.5 seconds. So this is basically when you defeated an enemy, then you would automatically get a charge back. Well now, I mean, it's gonna be way more viable now, especially in the higher tier difficulty levels. So now it's detonating combo grants 100% charge. This means you can be a combo master. So you pair this up with the Inferno Grenade or the Frost Grenade, and you're able to combo off another Storm's Primer builds, or even Interceptors Primes or Colossus Primes, any of the other javelins. You're going to be able to you're going to get your 100% charge back every time, and there's no default on seconds. You can get it every time you combo, so that's going to be very viable in the higher tier level of difficulty. And like I said with buffs, the Storm looks like they had a ton of different buffs. It looks like a bunch of reworks, but it's actually not. It's more just buffs in the percentages. But the ones I really wanted to touch on was Token of Daring, where originally the property was where a shield breaks, it increases shield damage by 20% for 20 seconds. Well, now it's even more viable because on shield break, it instantly recharges all your gear. So that's definitely going to be useful out in the field, especially in higher tier difficulty levels. And then Tone of the Precision. I like this change on this one because originally you were limited to just a sniper rifle, because originally the property was sniper rifle, weak point kills, increase electrical damage by 60% for 5 seconds. Well, the problem is it doesn't give you the freedom to use whatever gun you want. You had to use a sniper rifle in order to proc this property. So now they changed it to defeating an enemy increases elemental damage by 40% for 10 seconds. So this will definitely help with the freedom of how you want to manipulate your builds in any way and use what weapon you want, but also increase for those elemental storms out there. It'll increase the damage. And last one I wanted to touch up on storm buffs was basically 10,000 Suns, which I've covered in my Fire and Ice build before. But basically they changed it from after hitting an enemy, gain 5% increased damage for 5 seconds, stacking up to 20, so you get additional 100% damage. Well, they changed it up to make it more viable in the sense of you're gonna proc that property more often. So after hitting an enemy, you'll now gain 10% increased damage for 10 seconds, stacking up to 10. And remember that this ability, you can hit multiple enemies with the Burning Orb, and that'll also proc that Striker's Wrath. But yeah, that was basically all the buffs. The more important ones, again, you can look at the notes yourself if you want to see specifically to what changes have happened for your Javelin. But they also, as they did in the last patch, they added 6 other additional universal Masterwork components. Well, they've added another 5 to this patch. So we have Bloodlust, which is an inscribed component that increases melee weapon damage, increasing melee damage by 75% for 10 seconds when killing an enemy by using melee. There's also Acid Slugs, which adds specialized storage for enhanced shotgun ammunition and increased damage. So hitting 7 shotgun shots in a single burst applies acid on a target. Pretty nifty for priming targets. You have Giant Slayer, which adds specialized storage for enhanced marksman rifle ammunition and increased damage. It increases weak point damage by 50% after a consecutive marksman rifle hit streak. Focus Freeze adds special storage for enhanced light machine gun ammunition and increased damage, so the property is on a consecutive LMG hit streak, which is 10 shots, you'll freeze the target. Pretty useful, so it seems like they're adding a bunch of priming into these components. And the last component that they have that they added in, Feedback Loop. This basically adds specialized storage for enhanced assault rifle ammunition and increased damage. The property is increased damage resistance by 50% for 10 seconds when firing the last shot in an assault rifle magazine. Again, my main issue with the universal components is that they don't scale properly based on different levels. I mean, they only have like 149, I think, max health or shield unless they're an armor or shield component. So unless they make changes here, I mean, I'm not going to be using it in my build because I'd rather have survivability within my gear, but maybe you can come up with some pretty nifty builds on this, but I'd have to test it out. But honestly, if they don't increase the shield and armor, there's really no viable use for them to me. But I mean, that's basically the end of all the patch notes. They had a couple other ones that they showcased during the live stream. stream where he had the interceptor melee can now execute multiple melee attacks with a single held input. So no longer do you have to be spamming the button, you can just hold it down and your interceptor will automatically melee. I do note though that this is not on the interceptor's ultimate. It's only whenever they're out of ultimate. So I don't know why they did this. They wanted to keep it, I guess, more control whenever you're in your ultimate ability. Who knows? But honestly, I think they could have just kept it in there too and had it just across all fronts. It would have worked fine. So give feedback if you're an interceptor main on that one. Another big one they announced during the live stream that they have here on the end of the notes is the increase in max stamina for the thruster meter for all javelins was so they increased the thruster overheat time by 20% and reduced the base overheat duration by 20%. I honestly, playing this morning, I didn't notice really any difference. So let me know your feedback on that. I didn't notice anything. I think they could have buffed it to another 50% if they really wanted to make a definitive change. In a storm, you're likely to notice it a lot more because you're up in the air for a longer time and the cooldown on that is just ridiculously slow. So maybe it's just because I was in the Colossus this morning, who knows? But let me know your thoughts on that if you actually feel the difference in the 20%. I do like this one too. The fighter status effect on players no longer instantly overheats, so you know whenever those enforcers are shooting you with flamethrower flames up in the air, it instantly knocked you out of the sky. Well, now that's not going to happen. You're actually going to see your overheat meter gauge go up gradually when this happens, so we'll be able to keep on that and you can get out of there in time before he automatically tosses you to the ground. So this is especially useful for those storm mains out there. And the last patch note that I saw that was very interesting is they added the ability to enter hover underwater. Now I haven't tested this one out either, but that's definitely useful, especially for that one Doomsday Relic mission where you had to go underwater and get to the Strider and actually, I can't remember what you're getting, but you're getting some component down there and it was difficult to angle yourself properly. So that's going to be really handy whenever you're trying to get a chest down there or other consumables. So that'll be pretty nifty. And there you have it, gamers. This video was basically highlighting all the patch notes for this update. Again, tons of fixes have come within this patch, as well as some major buffs to our javelins, so it's time to get out there and gather up those legendary drops. But before I go, what are your thoughts on this patch? Do you like the fixes and buffs? Anything else you still feel they may have missed on within this patch? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks again for all your support, and until next time, gamers, this is Sir Mav, signing off.